America knows it's got a big debt hole to fill in. And when looking at the books, the world's biggest defense budget looks ripe to plunder. But Defense Secretary Robert Gates, who's due to leave the Pentagon next month, he warns that cuts would limit the U.S. military role in the world. RT's Kaylin Ford explains.
As Robert Gates winds down his time as Secretary of Defense, he isn't as eager to wind down America's $690 billion a year in military spending, even as the U.S. faces a $1.5 trillion deficit.
The defense budget is not the cause of the deficit and debt problem that we have as a country.
Once the secretary who denounced no-bid contracts and redundant military spending in the war on terror.
The attacks of September 11th, 2001 opened a gusher of defense spending that nearly doubled the base budget over the last decade. The gusher has been turned off and will stay off.
He used his last weeks in office to warn that too many cuts could spell danger for the United States.
It is important that we not repeat the mistakes of the past, where tough economic times or the winding down of a military campaign leads to steep and unwise reductions in defense.
Gates also warned against closing some of the U.S.'s more than 1,000 military bases worldwide.
Our record of predicting where we will use military force since Vietnam is perfect. We have never once gotten it right. There isn't a single instance, Grenada, Panama, the first Gulf War, the Balkans, Haiti.
Global military spending increased by $20.6 billion in 2010, and $19.6 billion of that was the U.S. alone. Other countries are closing deficits by reducing their defense dollars.
The United Kingdom, for instance, has started the process. Netherlands have started the process. Greece and Turkey, which had a long-time rivalry, have had discussions about mutual reductions. Virtually all the countries in Europe face this problem.
But the Pentagon budget continues to grow. The outgoing Secretary of Defense also called for a continued U.S. presence in Iraq, even as President Obama's timetable mandates a total withdrawal by the end of the year.
I hope they figure out a way to ask. And I think that the United States will be willing to say yes when that time comes.
Former defense contractor Michael O'Brien says the gap is likely to be filled by defense contractors.
We want to keep the number of soldiers low as possible because it's a political hot potato. But nobody bats an eye when 100,000 contractors go over to the same theater of operations.
Some analysts say America's military spending is too powerful for any defense secretary to control.
Whether he heads into the private sector to lobby as part of this revolving door culture that we have or not, he still, I think, feels protective toward these interests. He also recognizes that Pentagon is big business in the United States.
As Robert Gates prepares to hand the reins of the Pentagon over to Leon Panetta at the end of June, he says, quote, all of the low-hanging fruit have not only been plucked, they've been stomped and crushed. But facing cuts across the board, many Americans say they want to see the Pentagon tighten its belt as well. Kaylin Ford, RT, Washington, D.C.